Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of the Scaleway Sessions. This week, I am the last man standing out of the DevRel team. Dan is having internet issues, well, power issues, namely not having any. And Diego has been struck by illness, so he is our man in a van this week, running the stream from behind the scenes. Thank you, Diego. Silent Diego. I'm Eli. I'm one of the developer advocates at Scaleway, and today I am joined by Misha, who does many things, wears a lot of hats, and has so many interesting things to talk about with us today. Misha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, Ellie. I'm Misha Kozorovitskiy. I run DevOpsDays Birmingham, Alabama, and I help organize the Birmingham area software enthusiasts to help spread technology in our city here. And I'm the cloud testing infrastructure engineer at Hedgehog, where we're trying to create an open network framework to allow you to uh, well, I just missed that. Sorry about that.
Take another one at it, it's fine.
Yeah, I had the spiel. I said it about 20 times yesterday at a conference, and but to basically create a virtualized networking and allow you to interact with your network like you would a Kubernetes cluster, or like you would like AWS, where you can request an IP address, we give it to you. You can create VPCs and segmented network segments. You can orchestrate workloads all with the same DevOps tools you would use in the cloud.
So on-prem, things you own, things you can hold in your hand or look at in your basement, but with all the virtualization you expect from cloud provider.
Exactly.
Awesome. That's super cool. I bet there's a lot of weird technical stuff that makes that way more difficult than, my layperson understandings of it. And I think that sounds really complicated. But yeah, do you want to kick off with talking about that? Is there anything else you'd like to talk about today that you'd rather we talked about first?
Well, let's start off with that because this week I've been solving some really cool problems with, and by cool I mean like nested virtualization.
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
All right.
maybe we save that for the end.
It's containers all the way down, yeah.
Oh no, it's VMs in VMs with containers orchestrating the VMs in VMs. Yeah.
Excellent. I definitely want to hear about that for sure. But if you want to, we can build up to that.
Yeah.
Tell us sort of. I'm interested to know why that's a useful thing.
Well, so on hardware, on-prem, you have larger boxes. With virtualization, we usually are talking about like, five or really like four, sometimes even two CPU. Whereas here we're talking about like 192 CPU. We're talking about 500 gigs of RAM. And so how do you optimize that? Like, how
Yep.
do you utilize all that power? So people like AWS or Google Cloud, they've created these hypervisors that minimize or I guess containerize and segment the workloads. And on-prem, someone else has to do that. And
Right. So it's about providing granularity.
yeah, and isolation. So isolation is a huge part of that because when you have concurrent workloads, in a virtual machine, everything is isolated. Whereas, on the host system, if you're, creating networks for different things, and for our stuff, we have to build and test network operating systems. So we have to push traffic to it from different sources. So all that, like, it requires standing up this set of VMs. It's not even just one. And then, what if I have two tests going on the same box? Now, hardware-wise, there's plenty of power. Like we're just sitting there with unused capacity. But if we try to do them at the same time on like the root host file system, those networking connections, they will interact and they will disrupt each other. AppArmor. So we use a lot of Ubuntu, not not to push for them, but they have AppArmor, which protects the system from privilege escalation and other things that programs can do. And so it gets confused when you're trying to do a lot of things at the same time.
Right.
And so isolating that and containerizing it allows us to do parallel and to fully utilize the hardware. And it's really a problem that everyone's going to have if they try to move back from the cloud, right? They're going to need that ability. And so,
You're out here building the tooling to make sure it's ready for when people need that. Awesome.
and that's why I joined, because like this was like, this is hard and I don't know how to do this. So you're going to pay me to find out. Great.
Awesome. Yeah. I love a job where you get to learn lots of weird new things.
Right.
The job I work being one of those. Yeah. Awesome. Uh, So you are a DevOps person. This is one of the things that we've called this episode the one about DevOps. Could you tell me a little bit about like your journey into that space and sort of where you've come from and you know, yeah.
So surprisingly, it started pretty recently, 5 years ago. I was a web developer at first. Like I spent 10 years at a music agency called Bubble Up, where this content management platform I wrote first in 2006 ended up running about 500 music artist websites. So in fact, it still runs Aerosmith's website. Like right now, if you go to aerosmith.com/busa, like that's the site administration portal for a content management system that predates WordPress and is like
Oh,
in
that's
the
so cool.
like so so having to manage 500 websites before Git, like so imagine not being able to fork and not having that trail. So anytime you made an update on one system, like your other 499 had no idea. So we had to develop automation tools. We had this crazy thing written in PHP and MySQL, which allowed us to, I know, we ran DevOps and automation with PHP and MySQL. And it
Listen,
worked.
if it gets the job done, I've got some good friends who are PHP DevRel people, and WordPress powers what is it like a quarter of the world's websites or
I,
something? It's
I think it's even more. I think it's
yeah,
like over 30% now. It's just a
yeah,
ridiculous amount.
yeah. You disrespect those technologies at your peril, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely, and so you need to move them into the new way of thinking into the DevOps world, to make it easier for them and for everyone else that has to run their stuff. Uh, but so we built the system with Subversion where we would layer the core version of our like content management platform. We would layer over the templating and the customizations for a site, and then we would do literally a set replace on like the variables, and set is like a command line replacement tool. And so we would just run that to allow us to basically create multiple environments for every website. So we could do,
Ah,
staging and dev and production, and be able to do that in like 2010, and
right.
you know, which I guess at the time I didn't know that was DevOps. So so I thought I was just managing our software development and our pipeline and our multiple projects. And then it wasn't really until 2018 that I got into it. The company I was working for was sold, and I had like 6 months paid to like do stuff. My son was born, and I just learned. So my default when I'm bored and I have nothing to do is like go learn something, like go build something.
Hmm.
And I built a Docker container. And then I built a Kubernetes cluster, and I was like, holy crap, why isn't everyone on Earth using this? And then I realized that, well, like a lot of people were, and I was just
Yep.
late to the party. So, so that's when I took that 6 months. I learned, how to orchestrate stuff. And then I got a job as a DevOps engineer. That was the next thing I did was for a startup out of Houston, to orchestrate everything from ML workloads to like sensor data. It's a company called Arundo Analytics. They ended up spinning off another startup called DataSeer, where they're doing digital processing of using AI of reference data for refineries. So like basically
Ooh.
every widget, every component, and you can identify one, and then the machine learning algorithm can get the rest. And so orchestrating that learning, that UI, that was really my first production experience of you know in DevOps, and that was 2018. So
Right.
that's how my journey got started.
Hmm. Because you are also an organizer for DevOps Days, right?
I am, once I had that epiphany in 2018 of like everyone should be doing this, you know, I I built a banner and I started flying that flag high. Um,
Awesome.
we tried to do a DevOps Days here in 2018-ish or so in Birmingham, and I made the mistake of trying to expand it beyond DevOps. And so we got people from dev sides, and the idea was something I mentioned earlier too, is we as a small city need to be able to compete. Our median income here is like 32,000 US dollars,
Which
which
is
is
peanuts.
it's ridiculous.
Hmm.
And that's because a large percentage of our population is not in tech. Our kids are not getting educated in tech.
Hmm.
So DevOpsDays, Teals, programs like that help, you know, bring more people into the conversation, into the skills that they can then use to bring up their families, and you know, so that's really what got me into DevOps. It's like, all right, we can do this right. We can be a, maybe we can be a powerhouse for DevOps for the tech industry. There are people that talk about us being like the next tech hub, and I mean, we're in Birmingham, Alabama. That's the real hard stretch. But they're all focused on money too. Like, all right, so we have a lot of money coming in, but if development isn't being done here, if DevOps isn't being done here, that money is just flowing right back out. Right? It's not bringing up the city. It's making a few people rich and not, bringing up the population.
Something I've really loved about, so I'm a Python person, and PyCon UK, every year that it happens, or every year they try to. I think last year, after the first event after the pandemic, we didn't manage to do this, but they have a kids day or young coders day, where it's like, sort of ages 7 upwards, come and learn something that's going to be age appropriate in terms of like challenge level, but trying to get people into tech from a young age, make it accessible, make it just a part of the world and not something that's blocked off from them until they reach the point of having to choose a career. Because at that point, maybe that you're going to be competing against people who have had that, and you're going to be locked out. So, yeah.
So do you have the dates for that, or is that
PyCon UK this year is in September. It's from, I think it's the 21st to the 25th. Could be wrong. I should know this. I'm one of the organisers, but it's late September this year in Cardiff City Hall, and it's one of the things I think is really important about, as you say, like making this accessible as a career, because it is, for now, lucrative and one of the few professions where you can make that kind of money without being a doctor or a lawyer and having to spend loads and loads of money on expensive trade schools, essentially. Making that actually accessible to people in your community is super cool.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the few things, like you said, where if you have the literacy, you can learn it on your own. You could but you have to teach how to learn, and that has to happen at an early age, because once we're adults, we're all pretty set in our ways. Yeah. So I love your idea about like this, this youth day thing. Like, I wonder if we can incorporate that into DevOps Days, because I think that's wonderful. I remember, my mother was a programmer since 1982 in Russia. So,
awesome.
Like, doing seismic data analysis for subsurface imaging, which, funny enough, I actually worked on in Houston, possibly the same Fortran code from like forever ago. But
amazing. That's proper inheritance. We're not talking about like building a class off one other class, but inheritance is when you work on the same code base that your mom worked on.
Yeah, it's both sad and incredible at the same time. But the way I was first introduced into computers is they had an open, like, bring your kid to work day. And so I think it was Cruising USA or one of these other racing, like early racing games in like 91, 92, that was, and Tetris. Those were my first experiences with computers. And they just literally sat me down in front of a computer and was like, here's how you play Tetris. And, it turned out that was a fundamental like shift for me. But then it took one of my mom's programmer friends taught me Visual Basic. And I know how sad that is, but you already know I do PHP in MySQL, so I'm like expert at these.
Yeah, the company I worked for before Scaleway, the tool that they built was essentially like Visual Basic for the web, but and with Python. So like there are loads of people out there for whom Visual Basic was, it was really, really valuable. It let you do the things, do incredible, powerful things, and was people's entry point into tech. I think we still need that.
Absolutely. So what would you say, like, so I have kids, so for me this is very relevant. I try to teach all my kids programming, and I failed at every single one. I mean, the 4-year-old still has a chance. Like, I'm holding out hope for him, but I try to get my now 14-year-old when she was 7 to, I got her into Minecraft. And to build our own Minecraft mods, but looking back at it, I was trying to teach a 7-year-old Java.
Well, my baby brother, I say baby brother, he's 6 years younger than me. He's not really that much of a baby anymore, but his intro into tech was writing Minecraft mods. And I think he was probably about 14 when he was doing that. So not 7, but it's, and now he works. Now he's a programmer. Now he works at a company doing just that day in, day out. So it definitely can be. I think the key there is making sure it's something that's interesting to the person who needs to learn or who wants to learn. I
Do
mean,
you, do you think your brother was already interested before, like, or do you think that was then like, was it already in him, and then that was just like the spark that let him
maybe.
go?
I mean, listen, I'll get him on one of these. I'll get him on one of these streams one of these days and talk to him about it.
Oh,
I
that'd
have,
be awesome.
yeah. I think the key is with learning any new thing is it has to be interesting to like. I would link it to something that's already interesting. So like, for me, the fact that I can use, so I'm like a yarn crafter. I like do like sort of like knitting and like cross stitch and things like this. One of my favorite things I've ever built was an app to take a photo and turn it into a cross stitch pattern. And so
Whoa.
lots of like, I mean, the code is not actually that complicated. You like shrink the image down, that it's moderately complicated. But the thing that kept me going with that, even when it was like tricky and I had to look things up and I was getting stuck with it, is I'm going to have something at the end of this that I'm actually going to use or that I think is cool. Whereas something like just following a Codecademy course doesn't necessarily get you that. Like,
So what was your inception? What was like what got so you got into DevRel, but how did that how did that process play out? You took
oh well, my first thing of writing any kind of code at all, or tinkering with code, was actually I joined Tumblr as a teenager, still on it, best social media out there, and I wanted to write my own theme for my blog. So I learned a bit of CSS, and a lot of it was really ham-fisted, just tinkering and refreshing the page and so on. And from there, I was like, oh, this is actually something I can do and I could get into. And so when I went to university, I had coding as part of my course. I studied maths, and I went for that, and I liked it enough. I found it satisfying enough. You get the code to do what you want, and that feedback loop and that sort of gratification of like, oh, I've got it working. I've done something. I liked that enough that I thought, yeah, I could make a job out of this. And from there, I've just been bouncing around in tech. But I think it's something about real tangible results that you can connect to is what's going to help you get invested in something that honestly today I think is quite daunting to get into tech. Like it seems like this entire world in a way that it wasn't, even 10, 15 years ago.
so I mean that just makes it more important that we reach out to kids early, that we get
Hmm.
them exposed to see if there is a spark, if there is that that want to do stuff. But I mean I think also we're on the more complicated side of tech. So I wonder like when I started, so I had a similar story where there was a TV show in 1998, and I think I was 14, and called Earth Final Conflict, and it was Gene Roddenberry. It was maybe not the best show, I don't know, but I was a huge fan. It had
Hmm.
aliens, and that was cool. And I wanted to build a fan site, and you
Hmm.
know, to express my love for the show. And so, are you familiar with GeoCities? There's like really old.
Yes. I never used that one in particular, but there was like free webs that I tinkered with as a teenager. Yeah, I think that creative impulse is what's going to drive people to find tools to like have an outlet for it. And if those tools could be tech, then that's going to be a way to get people into tech.
I think to my point earlier, though, I think me and you are on the like the more DevOps to me is like you have programming, which it requires a little bit of knowledge, or you have to know a language,
Hmm.
uh, and then and then DevOps. And
Yeah.
I hate to do it like this because there are people who are software engineers that are like that are experts in their field, that know every ins and out of a language and can write things that are not just effective but performant and
Hmm.
resilient.
And
And
beautiful and elegant, and yeah. But I mean, it is true, if I know Python and I've got a little Django site and I've written it up and I've got it working fine on localhost, how do I put that on the internet? How do I make that useful to somebody else? I think that's something that Python in particular really struggles with, is sharing the work that you've done. Um, and how do I go about buying a domain name, putting it online, finding do I have to buy a computer to do that, or do I buy cloud space? How do I handle TLS for it? How do I make sure, I'm looking at this at the moment. I'm like, I've got a little Django site. I need to Dockerize it. I need to get Nginx on the front so that I can have it actually be a production ready server. I need to figure out how to serve static files. I need to do all of these things. So there definitely is a big jump between I've built something that's satisfying to I've built something that's useful and that I can put out into the world. And sort of more literacy around that is going to give people an edge as they want to extend their projects, extend their knowledge, and get into industry, doing that kind of thing. So yeah, the sort of DevOps group that you have in Birmingham, is that the kind of thing that you're focusing on? Do you get in other speakers?
So, I mean, DevOps Days, I think, it's a one event a year. So I don't think that's really, it wasn't the first thing we started, and it's not really enough on its own because.
So the software interest community that you have.
So Birmingham area software enthusiasts. So
That's
that
one.
group. So it actually started, over 10 years ago by the gray beards now, but as a bunch of different meetups, like a Java meetup, well, I think that was the main one, but the open source software meetup. We even had a layer meetup for Cold Fusion back in the day here, and interest waned, and we couldn't turn out people because it was very specific to a thing. It wasn't like it was less about the community of tech people and more about the specific tool. And as you know, tools change. And
They come and go, yeah.
Yeah, and you really should evaluate the right tool for the job in every specific case. And so in 2016, a group of people got together at this bar, and I was there, and we created Base. And all your base belong to us from that 1992 badly translated game. We use that as like our networking events. So we kind of played on us being Birmingham and enthusiastic about software, with that. And so we less regularly now, but I think now that we have some more sponsors from DevOps Days, we'll start doing that monthly again, where we'll get together for drinking or for chat conversation. Because it's something that I was reminded of yesterday, that not all people drink. I kind of get it. So we need to include those people. We need to make sure that those. So with Base, it's about networking and then doing lunch and learns and teaching people more skills. And the reason why we chose the lunch and learn format is because there's these. I heard it recently described as dark matter developers. Like those guys are the ones that go 9 to 5. They work at big institutions, and when they get off work, they check out. They're like with their family. They're doing, they're building stuff with their kids. But they completely disconnect from that world, and it's hard to maintain the edge and learning and be prepared. Like when that big company downsizes, when you're like that, and one of the things in Birmingham that we've tried to do is reach those dark matter engineers, and the effective ways of doing that is do it during billable hours where they can provide free lunch and make it an easy way for them as part of their professional work.
Make it easy for them to count it as professional development time if they've got training budget and things like this.
And it is. I mean, like at a lunch and learn that you'll come to, like we will teach you how to do a thing, and you can put your laptop out and do it, or just follow along and then do it later, because sometimes we go fast.
Yep.
So that's what really Base is about. It's about community, and then getting the people who are already in tech better. And then there's another group who are like these young kids who graduate boot camps, and they're eager, they're excited, but they have a really hard time finding jobs, because the reality is that you graduate from a boot camp, you still don't know how to work in an organization. That sigh was telling. But so I had okay, can we go tangent?
Yeah, absolutely. This is what we are here to chat about, anything and everything, and it could be tech, it could be not tech. So
all right, so I have this business idea that may end up being part of Base. So we're also working to become a nonprofit so that we can do our own financials for DevOps Days, and we can run other events, and companies can give us money, and it'd be tax deductible and stuff, and so we can be a real organization. But that's a whole nother thing. So one of the ideas.
Mountain of paperwork, yeah.
Oh my gosh. So I'm working on the bylaws. I think I have 17 pages so far, and I think maybe but like I have to get a lawyer to review all that, and um, but so how do you get these kids who graduate boot camps jobs? How do you get them to be actually productive members of a development team? Because companies are less willing to pay for that. They'd rather offshore, or they'd rather get a remote engineer that knows what they're doing.
And I mean, with all the layoffs going on right now, there's a lot of people with those skills and that experience floating around.
There are. I mean, I don't know if that. So, I don't know if there are enough layoffs to actually quelch the need. Because I think before the layoffs, we had something like 10 million open tech, like ridiculous amount of open tech jobs in America.
Wow.
And
yeah,
if you need a job. So back to this crazy business idea. I was going to call it Code Gauntlet. And have you ever watched Hell's Kitchen, Gordon Ramsay?
I've seen bits and pieces.
Where he yells at people and tells them to do better. So kind of that, but for bootcamp graduates. And the idea would be it would be a 12-week program where we partner with a nonprofit to solve a need for them, like write an app, whatever it is, create an application, like something that's usable, useful, that will provide value to them. And then we have 2 teams of 12 people create parallel projects to do that. And then every week we teach them something else. Like we bring in companies, like we have a local company here, Kavu, they do Scrum. So we bring in them for a week to teach Scrum. Meanwhile, this development is happening, and they teach them how to work in sprints. They teach them, and we would have to do weekly sprints. And then we give another group that talks about working together in source control. We get another group that talks about production optimization. And then we're constantly having deliverables on a weekly basis that these teams have to create.
Right.
And then every week people get cut. Up until 6 weeks in, where we should have half the people in each group, and then at that point we choose one of the applications, the one that's farthest along, and then the losing team is folded in to the remaining people of of the team whose application was
chosen. Yeah.
And then we guide that team to complete the application.
That's really cool, because then you're also getting the experience of like coming on board an existing product, because that's what you'll be doing when you come into a new job. You're not starting from scratch. Most of us are not doing greenfield development,
No, and we don't have that luxury, and that's the reality of life. And so this would teach a lot, but it would also add a lot of stress. It would be pressure driven because we would have cameras following you around. It would be like a complete show, because part of me is like, it has to be interesting. How do you get companies to sponsor it? How do you get everyone interested? But I think in the end, the people, even who don't graduate, the people who just go through this process will be way better prepared to work in the craziness that is engineering teams. And it will, I think boot camps don't really offer that level of stress and that level of, which is like, that's the real world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a boot camp grad, so I can't speak to that. But I mean, the thing I'm thinking as well is that obviously, as you go through, and I'm still fairly young, I'm still fairly early in my career, but I definitely have had enough jobs to know what kind of working environments are good for me, what kind of sort of structures. I've worked directly with founders, I've worked at the lowest rung of like big organizations, and having that experience, and sort of which a small part of which people will get from going through this process you just described, makes me much better able to choose what kind of job I want and where I'm going to best operate and be most valuable to the people that I work with. So just as much as you can get for people at the beginning of their careers, that's going to give them an enormous boost and help them ideally not end up somewhere where they're not going to be happy or productive or yeah.
I think that's going to require more work, though, like the last point that you mentioned, because the idea that it's okay to accept that you don't want to do something, and then have the foresight to move to something different. So did I hear that the Dan is alive?
Yeah. We have a Dan. We have Dan in. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
Yeah, Diego put the layout with Dan on. Excellent. Welcome back.
Thank you.
We've mentioned that your power issues, as in not having any.
Yes. It was very difficult to join a live stream on the internet using a computer without electricity.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Yeah. Turns out there's still a few fundamental things. Maslow's pyramid, the hierarchy of needs. Electricity is right there. right? So yeah.
Yeah, so we've been talking about DevOps and getting people into industry and sort of what the barriers to that currently are and stuff that Misha's doing in his community and ideas he has for around that. Yeah, now that we have Dan, are there any particular questions that you had for Misha?
Oh my God! I mean, the issue is y'all have been talking now for about 30 minutes.
Yeah, so we can laugh at you for not having been here. Yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, of course, I have tons of questions, but I don't know what it is you've already spoken about. And I certainly don't want to go backwards in the conversation. So, I mean, why don't you sort of pick up where you left off, and then I'll try to jump in.
So we were covering the crazy idea that I had about this TV show for Hell's Kitchen for coders.
Okay.
Boot
Tell
Camp
me more.
Plus.
So, well, you did kind of join late. We did just go over it, but
Oh, you did just go over. Okay, so new subject.
This is what I'm saying. Do you want to ask your questions? Because then,
yeah. All right. Well, I mean, so the whole idea. So, okay, how do I know Misha? Full disclosure, we've never met before, right? But we are part of the same community. We're part of the DevOps Days community. It may have already come up, in the first 30 minutes. And if you've never been, you're watching the stream, you're watching this afterwards, you may have heard of DevOps Days, you've never been to a DevOps Days, go to DevOpsDays.org, check out to see what events are going on in your area, because there's lots going on around the world all the time. There were like 4 just this week alone.
And in fact, backstage, Diego, who is running the show from behind the scenes, was at one of them.
Was that? There you go. Casares, if I don't know where the accent is, Casares or Casares.
Casares?
I don't know where the accent is on that one. So yes, so there are 4 around the world. If you've never been to one, check one out. I mean, I could talk easily off the top of my head for an hour about DevOps Days, but that's actually how Misha and I connected. I just went into our special super secret DevOps Days organizer Slack, and I said, "Hi, who wants to come talk about DevOps on stream?" And Misha was like, "I do," and that was that. Yeah. So I say this, in the interest of full transparency, in order to sort of lead into my next question, which is why DevOps Days? Literally, why DevOps Days as opposed to any other DevOps event, meetup? You could go do your own thing. You could get on board with another event series. You could attach yourself to another one of the zillions of DevOps branded things there are in the world today. Why did you decide, no, DevOps Days, that's the community I want to connect with. That's the event that I want to put on, and that's the group of people that I want to work with.
So a friend of mine who helped organize this, Michael Alvis, who was one of the co-organizers for DevOps Days Birmingham, he wanted to do one early on, and I messed up his conference in 2018 because I expanded it beyond DevOps Days. I was like, all right, well, let's get some developers in here. We're a small city, let's make it more educational, and it ended up just snowballing into this thing that ended up not happening. So I knew that, but at the time I didn't know about DevOps Days. And then in 2019, I went to DevOps Days Houston. I really have to thank DevOps Days Houston. They funded us. They gave us $4,000 to get started our first, 2022. We've never had.
That surprised me so much.
That's awesome. So I have to thank them. They were amazing. As an attendee in 2019, they showed a great time. They had amazing speakers, and I was like, holy crap, these are my people. And it was one of those weird things. And when I moved back, so I was in Houston for a little bit. For that company I told you that ended up selling and then giving me a bunch of time off. So I moved to Houston to work for them and got exposed to DevOps Days Houston. And that group really is responsible for getting me. And not to blame them for anything I do, because they're definitely not to blame for my actions. But because of them, because of their funding, and also just because of their support and including me in the community, I spoke, over there in 2021. So it was the community that got me into it. And the global brand is great, inclusive. How can you speak against the things that DevOps Days stand for? Spreading tech, creating a community, being inclusive of everyone. Those are just great things to live by. And so it's super easy to join DevOps Days. Whereas some of these other groups, they have, possibly ulterior motives. They have they're trying to sell stuff, they make money, which we all have to make money. Companies have to make money, otherwise they wouldn't pay for us, to be able to do this. But the egalitarian nature of DevOps Days was like, I could definitely get behind this. The brand offered mind, it offered mind share, it offered a little bit of marketing help. It is a known entity, and so to be able to be a part of that was really cool. And like that, and then when I started like reaching out to people, that's when Houston offered to help, and like, and now we're 2 years later. We've had 2 great events. I mean, we're a small event. We had 170 people. That's including everybody, speakers and sponsors at this last event. 165 at the first event. Now, I did a lot more marketing, and I did a lot more stuff, so numbers-wise, I was a little disappointed that I couldn't make a better turnout, but, we're maybe just a small city that, like, this is our reach, but it's cool because we had an amazing conference. All the sponsors that came out were like, this is fun. Like, we also had an open bar after too. Also, let that be in the planning for if you want to have a great conference, or a terrible conference, depending on how it goes.
Depending on your code of conduct, perhaps.
That's right. And that's another thing, right? DevOps Days is a great code of conduct, and so we just use the standard one. I think we're going to emphasize it a little more because I think we have this amazing local business owner, Elizabeth Anderson, who was the keynote for our first year, one of the keynotes for our first year, and then she spoke again this year. She still gets things like, why I didn't think you were like a technical person, or, so there was a little bit of that sexism that I'm really not proud of, but I feel responsible for, at our conference. And I think, we have to re-emphasize that. Like, the reason why we're here is so that we can all get better. Like, and you don't, like, we may be a male-dominated industry, but that is a self-reinforcing spiral of doom that we really need to get out of. And so I think, it's on all of us to do that. But DevOps Days provides that framework, but really each city has to push it a little bit. And I didn't think we would have to. I thought we were better than that, but it turns out we're all human. And
yeah, well, it turns out in any to take 100 people, 100 human beings, like, there's going to be racists, there's going to be sexists, there's going to be misanthropes, everybody's going to be in there, right?
Oh man,
there's going to be sad trombone, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've had experiences where code of conduct has been violated at conferences. As a trans person, as a woman, or not as a woman, but as someone perceived as a woman, things of this nature. And it's something that I always think, organizing a conference, which I'm doing later this year, like, you can spend your whole life trying to figure out how to do that properly. There's just it's so hard, so complex, and trying to be kind and respectful to everybody involved. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely something worth paying a lot of attention to, and I think we need to, community organizers who do that kind of work need to be given all of the flowers for actually putting in that work.
For sure, a community organization is tough, but I mean, you get community organization, but really it's people management, right? We don't want to use that word because managers, right? But like, speaking as a manager,
Yeah.
right? At the end of the day, I mean, it's talking about you're putting that group of people together, and in that group of people, there's going to be conflicting interests. There's going to be different, and it's good to have different interests. It's good to have sometimes a little bit of friction, a little bit of conflict, because that's where those intersections, where those interesting ideas are going to happen. We don't say we have to be mean to each other, but if we all thought exactly the same way and all agreed with each other all the time, things would be pretty boring, right?
Well,
So
there's
if we
that,
can
but
be
then there's also, should this group have human rights? It's not something that I go to a conference to disagree about.
Okay, the Overton window shifted there pretty rapidly, but
when we're talking about code of conduct stuff,
yes,
that's
I'm not talking about violations of code of conduct.
Yeah,
But this is the point I was getting to: is it's okay to have a group a homogenous group of people, right? But they're going to think the same, they're going to act the same, and if the way that they think and the way they act isn't good, then what have we accomplished, right? So, we're going to have a heterogeneous group of people, and that heterogeneous group of people, right? We're going to have some people that aren't going to get along. We're going to have some people that like maybe they talk about things in a way that you
That
don't
say
necessarily
racist
think is the
things.
way it should be
That
talked
say
about.
sexist things.
Right. And but there's a difference between, you know, having different ways of looking at things and coming and having different lived experiences and you know, having different perspectives, and then like saying, but you don't deserve to exist. There's levels there,
Yes, of
right?
course.
And so with the DevOps Days series of conferences, and I swear to God, I'm going to come back to DevOps here in a moment because I've had this conversation before, so follow me on this one. The DevOps Days series of conferences, when we started the whole thing quite a long time ago, it was 2009. I wasn't yet involved in the conference series then. It took me until 2011 to get involved. But when it was started back then, the whole point was, what can we do to help people who don't normally talk to one another? Like that was literally it. And that's the genesis of DevOps. That's why it's called DevOps. The devs and the ops don't talk to each other. So let's have them talk to each other. It sounds stupid, but there you go, right? And so the conference series was about getting these groups of people together that don't normally talk, and giving them a framework for it. People go to DevOps Days and go, what are open spaces? I've never been at an open space before. People forget the original DevOps Days were just unconferences. They were just open spaces. But it's hard to get your employer to put you on a plane and give you a hotel for unconference. It's difficult. So we had to then add traditional conference stuff on top of it, and that's why the format you have, you know, today.
Oh wow, so that's a really interesting bit of history there. I didn't know that.
Right. And that is really at sort of the heart of DevOps as a movement. People ask, what is DevOps? Okay, well, it's the thing that Microsoft Azure wants to sell you, and that's fine. Okay, good. Okay, what is DevOps? Well, it's a thing you put on your LinkedIn profile so you can make more money. Okay, but what is DevOps? Well, it's a book you read about a phoenix or something like this.
What
okay,
is Matty's quote? Matty's quote is like, you can't buy DevOps, but I can sell it to you. Or something.
Yeah, you can't buy DevOps, but I can sure try to sell it to you.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? But like, what is it at its heart? And people don't like this answer that I'm about to give because it's way too simple, right? And it feels unsatisfactory in a lot of ways because of the way we see this word, because the way we have perceived it in our industry today over the past decade. The heart of DevOps is literally just people finding better ways to work together. That's it. Right, and then all this stuff about these frameworks. You know, I mentioned the CAMs, Misha, when we were talking a little while ago, right? This acronym of you know, culture, automation, measurement, sharing. Why does that exist? Right, that thing got invented after DevOps, the CAMs, and it got exists as a way to try to quantify this idea of, well, how do we work better together, right? And then you have, you know, the loop. Everybody's seen the infinity loop with the, you know, the deploy, the measure, and it loops back in and deploys again. Everybody's seen this DevOps loop. Well, what's that about? It's literally just a way to try to quantify this nebulous concept of how do we communicate better? How do we do things more efficiently because we're communicating better, right? All this other stuff that came out of the DevOps movement, that all the software, all the books, all the certifications, all the vendors, all of the tens of thousands of companies around the world who have made billions and billions and billions of dollars off of these 6 letters in a row, right? It all stems from this one idea, which is, if we get people to talk to each other in a way that's constructive, then we can work better together. That's it.
It's one of the reasons I don't necessarily hate the proliferation of like DevSecOps, DevFinOps, GitOps, all of this, because they're driving at the same thing, which is there are more people we should be bringing into this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Hey guys, can you hear me still? I'm sorry, my camera went dead.
Yeah, we can still definitely hear you. You got this beautiful quizzical look on your face on the video.
Oh, well, that's excellent.
Yeah, it's like you're continually asking a question.
Hey,
there he is.
So can I challenge you a little bit on what you just said? So
absolutely
you
not.
Mentioned that. So you mentioned that this is like people management. So I disagree with that like violently, but not that too violently, but like, because I think it's like people leadership. So, and the difference there being that when you create these spaces, when you put people together, like sometimes when you put people together, violence happens, right? So you have to so the other thing that you said is super important is that you provide a framework for these interactions. You provide the code of conduct. But my point is that maybe we need to do a little bit more. Maybe we need to talk about the code of conduct. Maybe we need to emphasize that how we should treat each other. And I know it sounds crazy because I was raised to respect people. And we all were raised to respect people, but in the heat of the moment, when you're arguing with someone about a point, when you were talking about serverless versus Kubernetes,
microservices and monoliths, fight.
Vim versus Emacs.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it goes beyond that into just life, into like you said, bringing different people together, and but that's not enough. To me, that's we have to take that extra step of all right, we're all together now. Let's play nice. And I sound like my son's kindergarten teacher, but I think that's where we have to be. And maybe not just part of DevOpsDays, but also the Birmingham area software enthusiasts. That the inclusivity has to be a part of that. Otherwise, we're going to continue this train of homogenation.
Homogenization?
Is that? Yeah, I just made up a word. Maybe I don't know.
Maybe.
Homogenization, I think.
Yeah. Homogenization.
Let's ask the one person on this call right now who's a native English speaker. Is that a word, Eli?
Yeah, homogenization. I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, I get what you're saying. It's when you're there setting the tone and setting expectations and laying out how people should interact with each other in this space. And you have to be really intentional and clear about that, and make sure that it's expected of people that they be intentional about the ways that they interact, and sort of not take for granted that everyone's going to do it and have it as a thing that everyone's working towards. And that will allow, if people do get into an argument and about, one of the persons there, you've got the dust cloud with arms and legs sticking out of it, and it all got started because microservices versus monoliths or whatever. You can sort of go back and say, okay, how did this arise? Were we being intentional about adhering to the code of conduct and treating each other like people? It gives you much more of a framework to deal with those kind of things if you've made a big deal of the code of conduct first.
And I mean, as DevOps engineers, we kind of know that people don't do what they're supposed to do. That's just not a thing that that exists.
Oh, there's that joke about a programmer builds a bar and the QA engineer goes in and orders a beer, orders 9,999 beers, orders a lizard, orders -1 beers, and a real person walks into the bar
orders
and asks
emoji beers.
Oh yeah,
exactly.
And a real person goes into the bar and says, "Where's the toilet?" And it just all collapses. People are unpredictable. Even in hindsight, it's a totally obvious way for a person to have reacted. So.
Well, and this is one of the big things, when you look at, the DORA and you look at the State of DevOps report, and you actually start to dig into those details, where they're talking about things like deployment velocity and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's nice to go, okay, well, if we deploy more often, then we're doing DevOps better. This is sort of the thing you pull out of it if you read it is deploy more, then we're DevOpsing better. But it's actually wait, how do you even get to the point where you can be deploying more often? To get to that point where deploying more often actually is a net benefit to your organization because you're reducing your surface area, because you're reducing your risk level. It's not literally just deploying more often. Deploying more often is a side effect of a whole bunch of other things you had to do to get to that point, right? And we're talking about the code of conduct, we're talking about getting people to do things a certain way and so on and so forth. And let's bring that home, right? We're DevOps engineers. We're working inside of our organization. Maybe you have a different job title. It's fine. Don't worry about it, right? You're an SRE, you're a platform engineer, whatever, okay? But you're doing the DevOps. And what are the sorts of ways that you're implementing these principles so that you can get to the point where you are deploying more often and thus doing the DevOps properly, right? And I'm not saying that it's your job to create and enforce a code of conduct in your place of employment. If that is your job, something has gone off the rails. But the idea of your organization, the people you work with, being a community, it is. Whether it's intentionally one that you're fostering around you within your office, within your cohort, or not, it's ultimately a group of people who are all spending large amounts of time together, either physically or virtually, right? who all are working on similar, if not the same things, who are communicating to greater or lesser degrees on a regular basis, you definitely want to have a framework for that. You definitely want to have an agreed upon way to communicate with each other, to share information. You definitely want to set expectations about how you want to work together and what you're trying to achieve out of these relationships. Call it a social contract. If you want to start talking about promise theory, I mean, we can get into the philosophy of the thing, right? But it's extremely ingrained in this idea of DevOps. It's not enough to have a dashboard somewhere. The dashboard's great, but like, why these numbers? And what are those numbers telling us? And
there's
like
a lot of focus on those OKRs that I think is misplaced. And I get what you're saying. Like, it is the communication that you're facilitating behind that. So we are connectors. Like, as DevOps engineers, we are absolutely connectors in an organization. And I don't know if it makes sense to do like a formal, this is how we interact, but to do that through our actions, to do that through the self-service UIs we provide, the training we provide, to be the coaches of how we do things well together. How we, it's like the drummer on a dragon boat. Like, if everyone, that may be a bad reference. I did a dragon boat race in 2015. It was really cool. But
we did what? I know the boats. They get the
20 people
I saw those
rowing.
in Vancouver once, many years ago. Dragon boats.
So 20 people rowing and one drummer timing it. Vikings did this,
Gotcha.
But the idea is that, you're setting that tone.
You're setting the tone. You're setting the tempo.
Yeah. Tempo.
Yeah.
And that keeps everyone aligned. Otherwise, you got people flailing around, you got the boat turning, and all sorts of things.
Right. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I like what you said there about people that are doing the DevOps being connectors. Right? There's a lot of ways DevOps is the glue that sort of hold things together. And I think even we as engineers, we fall into the trap of thinking like, okay, our glue is code. Our glue is bash scripts. The internet is mostly bash scripts. Let's be honest.
It really is.
Right? So
you've got the cron job that renews your certificate.
yeah, it's cron jobs and bash scripts. All it is. Surprise!
Manageable code in there.
Yeah.
That runs the bash scripts.
Yeah, but like, how do you know which bash scripts to write? How do you know what APIs these things are pulling from? How do you know which files to be running freaking ugly Perl one-liners on, right? Like, it's because you've talked to people and you've gotten their needs and you've analyzed what it is that they require in order to do jobs better. And then you went to another person, you go, this person needs this information. They don't have it, but you have it, but you have no way of giving it to them in the way that they can use it. So I can help with that. And all of a sudden, boom.
It should be the ultimate problem-solving job, other people's problems.
But unfortunately, it's hard to put metrics when it comes to the people stuff, like what you've just been talking about. It's hard to put metrics on the stuff that actually moves the needle. And so you end up with, as you were saying, like OKRs that are mismatched to what the actual valuable work is. Turns out it's hard to put numbers on people stuff.
Turns out.
Yeah.
Turns out. And this is where, if you have within your organization, if you're blessed with a good quality human resources department, and I know HR, scary, right? All these terms we're throwing around. But
I love HR.
But here's the thing: if you have a good, a competent, functional HR department, if you're privileged enough to work in an organization with a good HR department, these are people who can absolutely help you with this stuff. This is their bread and butter, right? Is healthy ways of measuring and understanding these squishier sorts of concepts that sometimes we as engineers have a little bit more difficult time wrapping our heads around. Let's be honest, right?
So dev HR ops is what you're saying.
Dev, yes.
Can we make
Dev
that?
HR ops.
Should we make that a thing? I don't.
Yeah, I think we've got to pioneer this, and we're going to create an entire industry that's.
I like because then you can pronounce that Dev HR ops.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Dev HR ops 2023 coming to a locale near you.
Hey Dan, what city are you in?
I am currently not in a city. I am currently in the countryside, which is why I didn't have power earlier. But normally I am based out of Paris.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So
We can
I don't suggest doing our first edition of DevOps in Paris. Everything in Paris is hideously expensive. Let's find somewhere cheaper, like, I don't know, London. Wait.
Birmingham, Alabama is really
Come to
cheap.
Sheffield. Come to Sheffield.
I mean,
I've never been to. Okay. Hold on, just the one in Alabama. How is it pronounced out loud?
Birmingham.
You say the H, Birmingham.
Yep. Ham.
Okay.
Like,
But to me, that's like Birmingham in the UK. I would still say Birmingham, Alabama, like that. That to me, that's not the difference in the place names. That's the difference in the accent.
absolutely.
But maybe I should be saying Birmingham.
No. I think it's perfectly fine. Like
I think they're the same name, but with different accents.
Absolutely. So it's just pronunciation. I mean, I go Beham, like.
Yeah,
I'm sure you're Americans. You're very busy. You don't have time to say all the syllables. I get it.
We say Brum in the UK for Birmingham. Yeah, if you're from Birmingham, you're a Brummie. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Well, but this is true. Like, for example, just not too far from Paris, there's another smaller city which many people around the world have heard of. It starts with the letter V. It's Versailles, right? So people remember, oh, there was a king there and he got his head cut off and something revolution. Great, super. But there's also a Versailles. There's more than one, but there's one particular one in the United States. And I was surprised very recently to learn that the local way it's pronounced by people who actually are from there, right, is Versailles.
Mm-hmm.
So while I agree it's the same word and it came from the same origin, they are very specifically not pronounced the same way.
All right, before we run out of time, can I just invite both of you to come to Birmingham, Alabama? Would love to show you all around. And look, we have great weather. We have wonderful, sweet people, and we have a great DevOps conference. So just throw that out there. I'd love to show you all the town. If y'all ever are in America and just feel like coming to nowhere.
Is there not a NASA thing in Alabama?
So that's 2 hours north in Huntsville, and I'll be happy to take you up there. We have up there. Like, Huntsville is a cool city, but now Birmingham's got the only DevOps days in Alabama, just for the record.
All right, fair enough.
Although the Huntsville team would be happy to help them, because I mean, in the end, like, this is better when more people do it. And
do you have a coastline with beaches?
We do. It's beautiful. I actually got married a few years ago on the coastline and beaches. Orange Beach, beautiful white sand beaches. Gulf Shores is excellent. I mean, we are right next to Florida, so you do have to deal with that. But
shade. Oh,
the alligators.
Southern violence.
I'm just kidding. We love our Florida neighbors.
All right. Well, that's I've not been. I've never been to any part of that. I've been to the United States, but not that part of it. So don't be surprised if I'm knocking on your door next year.
That would be awesome. Would love to have you.
I've only been to New York in terms of being in the States. I think that's it.
So you can fly.
No, I went to Salt Lake City last year for PyCon.
You can fly straight to Atlanta, I think, from Europe. Pretty much anywhere, any major airport fly to.
Oh yeah, I've transferred to Atlanta a zillion times direct from Paris. So yeah.
We are a 2-hour drive from Atlanta, or a 90 minutes at the airport total gets you to Birmingham from Atlanta. So it's
okay, great.
Scaleway DevRel road trip.
There you go. Let's do it. Gets me every time. Every time. All right. Well, we are at time. I am sure the conversation that happened before I got here was fantastic and amazing, but the conversation that I was able to enjoy with y'all was fantastic and amazing for sure. So thank you so much. Super, super appreciate it. As you can see on the screen right now, check out Hedgehog's GitHub, github.com/githedgehog, right? Misha, did you have a chance to plug Hedgehog yet?
I did at the very beginning.
Right,
we are an open network fabric to repatriate your data from the cloud and offer distributed networking framework where you can access through the Kubernetes API. So basically one API to rule them all.
Nice, very good. We'll tell you what, next time we have a Kubernetes themed session, we'll let you know. Maybe you can come through and talk about some Kates with us. Super appreciate that. Speaking of Kubernetes, have we talked about behind the helm yet, Eli?
We haven't insofar as me actually saying things about it. So I've given it to
Sure.
Diego to put up a little scroll. There we go.
Yeah.
There's a monthly letter, the newsletter that I write for Scaleway, well, for people who read it, but on behalf of Scaleway, about the latest happenings in Kubernetes world, cloud native, containers, all that good stuff. I also write a crossword to go along with each one. So please, I would love people to do the crossword and give me feedback. Do you like cryptic ones? Do you like non-cryptic ones? Would you like different words? Would you like different themes? I crave feedback. So please sign up to the newsletter and tell me how you feel about it. But also, it's a fun thing that we do.
You can also check out previous editions of the newsletter. We're posting them after the fact. And this is brand new, by the way, as in before I lost power, I uploaded them. So dev.to/Scaleway, just go to dev.to/Scaleway. You can check out some other stuff that Scaleway's posted there, of course, but we are now also putting up previous editions of the newsletter there. But if you want the freshest, hottest news and the crossword 2 weeks before everyone else, you got to be on the newsletter. But go check it out, dev.to/Scaleway for the previous editions. Very good. All right.
Anything else you want to plug, Misha?
No, I'm good. Y'all been wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for coming out. Super appreciate it. Diego also put up on the screen, Eli, you're speaking at NDC Oslo. Is that not correct?
I am. I'm talking about data storage. I was going to talk about it when we were saying about the difference in pronunciation of the two city names. And it's all about sort of how do we store data? How do we turn ideas into physical objects? And how do you get the same idea back out? And the thing is, you can't even do that with language and sound, as we've just discovered. So, you have the same sequence of letters and two people pronounce it completely differently. So I'm having a hard time not going down a philosophical rabbit hole as I write this talk.
Don't hold back. Just do it. Just
maybe.
Go 100%. Go all in. See what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, as always, for joining us on Twitch, for watching on YouTube, for always interacting with us on the socials in between episodes, letting us know what you would like us to be talking about. We always like to have guest suggestions as well. We do our best, right? We can't. It's a little difficult, to get, for example, Kelsey Hightower. He's a very busy man. Everybody's asking, well, why don't you talk to Kelsey? I would love to talk to Kelsey. So Kelsey, if you're watching. But until then,
I suspect he is incredibly busy at all hours of the day.
No kidding. But so thank you so much, Misha, for coming through. Super appreciate it. Definitely want to check out Birmingham in the future. So
put about 7 H's in there.
Yeah, exactly. Birmingham.
Corrupt.
And thank you, of course, to Diego behind the scenes for managing everything, for setting the stream up, for putting the splashes on, for doing the soundboard. I hope you feel better soon, buddy. We're going to catch you live next week. And as always, we'll catch all of you live next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good one. Stay safe.
There you go.